I watch from the window as headlights cut through the darkness 3 blocks away, and my son sleeps in the room behind me, unaware that in exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds, his entire world will change in ways I cannot predict, cannot control, cannot take back no matter how desperately I might want to, when this night inevitably reshapes the careful, fragile existence I have built for us over these last 3 years of running, hiding, and pretending that distance could ever truly sever the connection between a father and his son. Unaware that the monster from my past, the man who has haunted my dreams and my waking hours in equal measure, is also the other half of his DNA. The source of those dark eyes that sometimes look at me with an intensity that steals my breath, because they are so achingly familiar, so devastatingly his. Unaware that I have just made a choice that might save us or destroy us, and I will not know which until it is far too late to take it back, to run again, to disappear into another city with another name and another version of myself that does not include him. The apartment is too quiet, the kind of oppressive silence that settles over a space when something monumental is about to shatter the ordinary rhythm of life, when the universe itself seems to be holding its breath in anticipation of a collision that has been building for years, gathering momentum with every mile I put between us, every lie I told myself about why I had to stay away, every night I woke up reaching for someone who was not there and should not be wanted. Maria sits in the kitchen behind me, her disapproval radiating off her in waves that I can feel without turning around, without needing to see the tight line of her mouth or the worry etched into the creases around her eyes, because she has been with me since the beginning of this particular chapter of my life, since I showed up on her doorstep 7 months pregnant and terrified, begging for help from the only person I trusted who existed outside of his world, outside of the gilded, dangerous cage I had fled from in the middle of the night, with nothing but a suitcase and a secret growing inside me. She had taken me in without question then, had held my hand through labor when I screamed for a man who could not be there, who did not even know I was bringing his child into the world, and she has been asking questions ever since. Careful questions wrapped in concern that I have deflected with practiced ease until tonight, until I told her that he was coming, that I had finally given him the address, that the wall I had so carefully constructed between my old life and my new one was about to come crashing down. "You are making a mistake," she had said, and I had not argued with her because how could I, when I was not entirely certain she was wrong, when every instinct I had honed over 3 years of survival was screaming at me to run again, to pack up Luca in the middle of the night and disappear before those headlights reached our street, before he knocked on the door and everything changed irrevocably. But I am tired of running, so tired that the exhaustion has settled into my bones and made a home there. And more than that, I am tired of lying to my son every time he asks about his father, every time he sees other children with their dads at the park and looks at me with questions in those amber-flecked eyes that are so heartbreakingly identical to the man currently driving through the city to meet him for the first time. I am tired of being the only one who carries the weight of this secret, the only one who knows that somewhere out there is a man who would burn the world down if he knew what I had kept from him, what I had stolen when I left. The most precious thing he never knew he wanted until I told him in that hospital room that our son existed. The headlights are 2 blocks away now, and my heart is hammering against my ribs with such force that I wonder if it is possible for panic to actually stop a heart, if fear can be physically lethal in the way that his presence has always been emotionally devastating, unraveling me with a single look, a single touch, a single word spoken in that low, dangerous voice that used to whisper promises and threats in equal measure against my skin in the dark hours of the morning when the rest of the world was sleeping, and we existed in a bubble where nothing else mattered except the way our bodies fit together, the way our silences were more intimate than most people's conversations. I press my palm against the cool glass of the window, trying to ground myself in something tangible, something real, because this moment feels suspended somehow, like I am watching it happen to someone else, like I am hovering outside my own body and observing the woman standing at the window, waiting for the man who destroyed her and saved her in equal measure to come and meet the child they made together in what feels like another lifetime. Luca stirs in his room, and I freeze, listening with the hypervigilance that all mothers develop, that ability to hear the slightest change in breathing, the smallest shift in sleep patterns that might indicate a need, a nightmare, a moment where I will be required to set aside my own fear and be the steady, unshakable presence that he needs me to be. But he settles again, his breathing evening out into the deep, peaceful rhythm of a child who feels safe, who has never known danger, who has been protected so carefully from the reality of who his father is and what his mother ran from that he exists in a bubble of innocence I would do anything to preserve, even as I am about to pop it simply by opening the door and letting that man into our sanctuary. "He is here," Maria says from behind me, and I do not need to turn around to know that she is standing now, arms crossed over her chest in that defensive posture she adopts when she is preparing for battle, preparing to protect me and Luca from whatever threat she perceives. And right now that threat is arriving in an expensive car with tinted windows and a man inside who commands empires and destroys enemies, and who I once loved so desperately that leaving him nearly killed me. "You do not have to let him in," she continues, and there is an edge of desperation in her voice now. A last-ditch attempt to change my mind, to convince me that I can still choose differently, that I can turn off the lights and pretend we are not home and hope that he will simply leave, though we both know that is a fantasy, that once I gave him this address, once I opened that door even a crack, there was no closing it again. The car pulls up to the curb outside our building, sleek and black and utterly out of place in this modest neighborhood where most people drive practical sedans and minivans, where families live quiet lives behind doors that lock with simple deadbolts instead of the sophisticated security systems that I know he has already researched, already planned to upgrade, already decided are insufficient for protecting what is his. The engine cuts off, and for a moment nothing happens. And I find myself wondering if he is sitting in the car, having the same crisis of faith that I am having, if he is questioning whether he is ready for this, whether he can be what Luca needs, whether walking through that door will change him in ways he cannot predict or control. But then the door opens and he unfolds himself from the driver's seat with that economical grace that has always characterized his movements, that sense that every action is deliberate, calculated, efficient in a way that speaks to years of training, years of existing in a world where hesitation can be fatal. I cannot see his face from this distance, from this angle, but I do not need to because I have memorized every line, every plane, every expression that can cross those features that are somehow both beautiful and brutal, that attract and repel in equal measure depending on whether you are in his favor or have made the catastrophic mistake of becoming his enemy. He is wearing dark clothes, expensive but understated. Nothing that screams wealth or power, but everything about the way he moves, the way he carries himself, announces that he is someone important, someone dangerous, someone who is accustomed to being obeyed without question. And I wonder what the neighbors will think when they see him, if they will sense what he is the way animals can sense predators, or if they will simply see a well-dressed man visiting someone in the building and think nothing of it at all. He pauses at the entrance to our building, and for a wild moment I think perhaps he is going to turn around, going to get back in his car and drive away and give me a reprieve I do not deserve. But then he reaches for the door and I know with absolute certainty that the moment he steps inside, everything changes, that there is no going back from this, that I have set something in motion that will reshape all of our lives in ways I cannot begin to imagine. My phone buzzes in my pocket, and I pull it out with shaking hands to see a text from him. Simple and direct in the way that all his communications are. "I'm here. Are you going to make me wait? Or are you going to let me in so I can meet my son?" The words hit me like a physical blow, and I have to steady myself against the window frame because the reality of it is suddenly overwhelming. The fact that in a few moments he is going to walk through that door and see Luca, going to look at the child we made together, going to have to reconcile the abstract concept of son with the living, breathing, beautiful boy sleeping in the next room who has his eyes and his stubborn jawline and his tendency to go very, very still when he is thinking hard about something. I type back with fingers that refuse to cooperate. "Third floor, apartment 3B, please be quiet. He's sleeping." The response is immediate. "I know how to be quiet, Elena. I've been doing this a long time." And he has, I think, as I move away from the window toward the door, as Maria watches me with an expression that mingles concern and resignation, as I unlock the deadbolt with hands that will not stop trembling, no matter how much I will them to be steady. Because being quiet, being invisible, moving through spaces without being detected is part of what he does. Part of what makes him so effective at the things he does not talk about, but that I have always known were happening in the shadows of the life we live together. I hear his footsteps on the stairs, measured and unhurried, and I wonder if his heart is racing the way mine is, if he is terrified beneath that controlled exterior, if becoming a father is as overwhelming for him as it has been for me, or if he is simply approaching this the way he approaches everything else in his life, as a problem to be solved, a situation to be managed, a new piece added to the board of his carefully orchestrated existence. The knock, when it comes, is soft enough that it would not wake Luca, but firm enough that I know he will not be ignored. And I take one last deep breath, one last moment to steady myself, before I reach for the doorknob and pull the door open to find him standing in the hallway, looking exactly as I remember, and completely different all at once. He has not changed physically in the 3 years since I last saw him. Still tall and broad-shouldered and imposing in a way that makes the narrow hallway feel even smaller. Still devastatingly handsome in that harsh, uncompromising way that has always made my breath catch. But there is something different in his eyes. Something raw and vulnerable that I have never seen before. Something that tells me he is just as terrified as I am. Just as uncertain. Just as aware that this moment is going to change everything. "Elena," he says, and my name in his mouth after 3 years of silence is almost too much to bear, carries too much weight, too much history, too much of everything we were and everything we lost, and everything we might become now that this door has been opened. Where is he? The question is not demanding, not aggressive, but there is an urgency beneath it that makes my chest tighten, that reminds me that for all his control, for all his carefully constructed composure, he is a man who has just discovered he has a son, who has spent the hours since that revelation imagining this moment, building it up in his mind, and who is now standing on the threshold of something that matters more than anything else in his carefully ordered world. I step back, opening the door wider, and he crosses the threshold into my home, into the sanctuary I built for Luca and myself, and I watch as his eyes sweep the space, taking in every detail with that assessing gaze that misses nothing, cataloging the modest furniture, the toys scattered near the couch, the photographs on the wall of Luca at various ages, growing from infant to toddler to the small boy he is now, all without him, all in secret, all in the life I built without the man who should have been there for every moment. "Down the hall," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper, and I gesture toward Luca's room, toward the door that is slightly ajar, toward the threshold beyond which his son sleeps peacefully, unaware that his father has finally come home. He moves toward it slowly, as if he is afraid that moving too quickly will somehow shatter this moment, will wake him from a dream he is not ready to leave. And I follow a few steps behind, watching as he pauses at the door, as his hand comes up to brace against the frame, as he looks into that room and sees for the first time the child we made together, the living proof that what we had was real, was powerful enough to create something perfect and innocent and wholly untainted by the darkness that has always surrounded us. I cannot see his face from this angle, but I see the way his shoulders tense, the way his breathing changes, the way he goes absolutely still in the way that I know means he is feeling something so intense that he cannot trust himself to move, to speak, to do anything except absorb the reality of what he is seeing. Luca is curled on his side beneath his favorite dinosaur sheets, one arm wrapped around the threadbare stuffed wolf that has been his constant companion since he was old enough to clutch it. His dark hair falling across his forehead in a way that makes him look even younger than his 3 years. Even more vulnerable. Even more precious than he already is. The nightlight near his bed casts soft shadows across his face, highlighting the curve of his cheek, the length of his lashes, the small, perfect features that are an impossible blend of both of us. And I watch as the man in the doorway, the dangerous, powerful, untouchable man who has built an empire on fear and respect and ruthless efficiency, begins to tremble as he looks at his son for the first time. He looks like Mikhail did, he whispers, so quietly that I almost do not hear him, and the name stops my heart because he has never, not once in all the time I knew him, mentioned his brother, the one who died when they were children, the ghost that has haunted him his entire life. And I realize in this moment that what I am witnessing is not just a father meeting his son, but a man confronting every loss, every regret, every moment of his own stolen childhood reflected back at him in the face of this innocent child who carries his blood. At that age, before everything before his voice breaks, actually breaks, and I have never heard that happen before, have never seen this man show this kind of vulnerability, this kind of raw, unfiltered emotion, and I find myself taking a step closer, my hand reaching out to touch his back, to offer comfort to someone who has never needed comfort, who has always been the strong one, the unbreakable one, the one who protects and never needs protecting. He does not pull away from my touch, and I feel the tension vibrating through him, the barely contained need to go to Luca, to touch him, to confirm that he is real, combined with the equally powerful fear of waking him, of shattering this perfect moment of observation, of having to explain to a 3-year-old child who this stranger is and why he is standing in his bedroom in the middle of the night. We should go, I whisper, because I cannot bear to watch him struggle like this, cannot bear to see the man who has always been so certain, so controlled, so utterly unshakable reduced to trembling stillness by the sight of his sleeping son. And after what feels like an eternity but is probably only seconds, he nods and allows me to guide him away from the door, back down the hall, back to the living room where Maria is waiting with an expression that suggests she has been listening to every word, witnessing every moment, and has her own opinions about all of it. He sinks onto the couch as if his legs will no longer support him, and I have never seen him sit like this, without that perfect posture, without that coiled readiness that suggests he could spring into action at any moment. And I realize that what I have just witnessed is the complete and utter destruction of every defense he has ever built, shattered by 30 seconds of looking at a sleeping child who is his, who exists because of him, who has been in the world for 3 years without his knowledge or protection or love. His name, he says, looking up at me with eyes that are suspiciously bright, that might contain tears if he were anyone else, if he were the kind of man who cried, which he is not, and never has been and probably never will be except, maybe, possibly, right now in this moment that has unmade him so completely. Tell me his name. Luca, I say, and I watch as he repeats it, testing it on his tongue, making it his, and then I add the rest because he deserves to know, because I made this choice 3 years ago, and he should understand why. Luca Mikhail. His eyes snap to mine, wide and shocked, and filled with something that might be gratitude or might be anguish or might be some combination of both. And he opens his mouth as if to speak, but no words come out. And I realize that I have rendered him completely speechless, that the gift of naming our son after his lost brother is more than he knows how to process, more than he knows how to accept, more than he ever expected from the woman who ran from him in the middle of the night without explanation or goodbye. You named him after Mikhail, he finally manages, And it is not a question but a statement of disbelief, of wonder, of something too complex to name. You did not even know him, did not even know what he meant to me, and you? He stops, shakes his head, runs his hands through his hair in a gesture of frustration and overwhelm that is so unlike him that it makes my chest ache. And I want to go to him, want to comfort him, want to explain that I knew enough. That in the quiet moments when he thought I was sleeping, I heard him whisper his brother's name like a prayer, like a curse, like a wound that never healed. And I wanted to give him something, wanted to honor that loss even as I was creating this new life that would hopefully, eventually, heal some of that ancient pain. I knew you loved him, I say simply, because what else is there to say? How else can I explain the decision I made in a hospital bed while holding my newborn son and trying to decide what to call him? What name to give this perfect creature who had his father's eyes and his father's stubborn chin and deserved a name that meant something, that connected him to the man he would never know? Or so I thought then. That was enough, I finish, and he looks at me with an expression that is so raw, so unguarded, so completely vulnerable that I have to look away because I cannot bear it. Cannot bear to see him like this. Cannot bear to be the cause of this particular kind of pain that comes from being given something you desperately wanted but never expected to receive. Maria clears her throat from the kitchen, reminding us that we are not alone, that there is a witness to this moment, and the spell breaks slightly as he straightens, as he pulls himself together with visible effort, as the mask begins to slide back into place even though I can see the cracks in it now, can see that it will never fit quite as well as it did before tonight. What happens now? Maria asks, and it is the question I have been avoiding thinking about, the question that has no easy answer, no clear path forward. Because how do you integrate a man like him into the quiet, normal life I have built for Luca? How do you explain to a child that his father is finally here but cannot truly be here in all the ways that matter? Cannot coach his soccer team or attend parent-teacher conferences or do any of the ordinary things that fathers do without drawing dangerous attention, without making them targets, without exposing them to the violence that is never far from his world. Now, he says, and his voice is steadier now, more controlled, more like the man I remember. I get to know my son, and he gets to know me, and we figure out how to make this work because walking away is not an option, was never an option from the moment you told me he existed. He looks at me, and there is steel in his gaze now. Determination mixed with something that might be warning or might be promise. I will be here tomorrow, Elena. And the day after that. And the day after that. Every single day until he knows me, until he trusts me, until he understands that I am his father, and I am never, never leaving him the way everyone else in my life has left. The way I was left. The way I will not allow to happen to him because he deserves better. Deserves everything. Deserves the kind of father I never had, and will somehow, God help me, figure out how to become. The intensity of his words, the fierce protectiveness already evident in every syllable, makes my throat tight, makes my eyes burn with tears I refuse to shed. Because this is what I wanted. What I hoped for when I finally broke down and told him the truth. But it is also terrifying in its absoluteness, in its finality, in the way it confirms that there is no going back from this moment, that Luca's life and my life and his life are now inextricably tangled together in ways that will be beautiful and complicated, and probably, occasionally, absolutely devastating. Okay, I manage to say, though the word feels wholly inadequate for the magnitude of what we are agreeing to, what we are beginning, what we are choosing despite all the very good reasons we should not. He stands, and for a moment I think he is going to leave, going to walk out the door and give us all time to process, to prepare, to steel ourselves for tomorrow when this begins in earnest. But instead he moves back down the hallway, back to Luca's door, and I follow because I cannot help myself, because I need to witness this, need to see what happens next. He stands in the doorway again. But this time he does not stop at the threshold, does not keep that careful distance. And instead he takes one step into the room, then another, moving with that preternatural quiet that makes him so dangerous in his world, until he is standing beside Luca's bed, looking down at his son with an expression of such profound love and fierce determination that it takes my breath away and makes me believe, against all logic and experience, that maybe, possibly, we might actually survive this, might actually build something good from the wreckage of what we were. He reaches out slowly, carefully, and with one finger he brushes a strand of dark hair away from Luca's forehead, the touch so gentle, so reverent that tears finally spill down my cheeks, because this is what I wanted for our son. This is what I have been protecting him from, and denying him in equal measure. This love from a father who will be complicated and dangerous, and absolutely devoted in ways that most children will never understand or experience. "I will keep you safe," he whispers to the sleeping child, a vow spoken in the darkness, a promise made to someone who cannot hear it yet, but who will, someday, understand what it means to be protected by a man who knows how to be a monster to the rest of the world, so that he can be a father to his son. "I will give you everything, will be everything you need, and I will make sure that you never, ever have to be afraid the way I was afraid, the way I am still afraid every moment of every day that something will take this away from me before I have had a chance to deserve it." And as I watch him stand vigil over our sleeping son, as I see the way his hands shake slightly even though he is perfectly still, as I understand that this man who controls empires and commands armies has just been brought to his knees by 3 feet of sleeping child, I realize that whatever happens next, whatever challenges we face, whatever dangers emerge from the choice I made to let him back into our lives, we have already crossed the threshold into something new, something terrifying, something that might just be worth every risk if it means that Luca grows up knowing his father, if it means that the man standing in this room gets a chance at redemption, if it means that I finally stop running and start building something permanent with the only man I have ever loved, the only man who has ever terrified me, the only man who could possibly understand what it means to love something so much that you would destroy anything that threatened it. He turns to leave, finally, reluctantly, as if every step away from that bed causes physical pain, and when he reaches the front door he pauses, his hand on the knob, and looks back at me with eyes that are dark and serious and filled with too many emotions to name. "Thank you," he says, and the words are weighted with everything we have not said, everything we cannot say yet, everything that will have to wait until we figure out how to be parents together, how to exist in each other's lives again without destroying each other the way we nearly did before. For telling me, for letting me see him, for naming him. He stops, swallows hard. "Thank you, Elena, for giving me a reason to become someone better than I am." And then he is gone, the door closing softly behind him, and I am left standing in my living room with Maria watching me with an expression that suggests she has many thoughts and opinions about what just transpired. And down the hall, Luca sleeps peacefully, still unaware that everything has changed, that tomorrow when he wakes up, his life will begin to shift in ways neither of us can fully predict. I walk back to his room, unable to help myself, and I stand where his father stood looking down at my beautiful boy, and I whisper into the darkness, "I hope I did the right thing, baby. I hope I did not just make the biggest mistake of my life by opening that door, by letting him in, by believing that men like him can change, can be what we need them to be, can love without consuming, can protect without imprisoning, can be fathers without being the monsters that made them." But even as I say it, even as I voice my fears to my sleeping son, who cannot answer, cannot reassure me, cannot tell me that everything will be okay, I know that it is too late for second-guessing, too late for doubt, too late for anything except moving forward into whatever tomorrow brings, and I find myself both dreading and desperately anticipating the moment when Luca opens his eyes and I have to find a way to explain that the dark-eyed stranger who will be standing in our kitchen tomorrow morning is not a stranger at all, but rather the other half of his story, the missing piece of the puzzle that is his identity, the father who has finally, against all odds and despite 3 years of separation, come home to claim what is his, and I have no idea if we will survive it. But I know with absolute certainty that there is no going back, no undoing what has been done, no closing the door that I have opened, and that tomorrow, when the sun rises on this new reality we are building, everything I thought I knew about safety and love and family is going to be tested in ways I cannot begin to imagine, and all I can do is hold on, trust that I made the right choice, and pray that the man I loved enough to run from is also the man I can trust enough to run toward, for Luca's sake, for my sake, for all of our sakes as we step into the unknown together. For 3 years I taught my son that strangers were dangerous, that we kept to ourselves, that quiet and invisible meant safe. And now, as I watch the morning light creep across his bedroom floor while he still sleeps peacefully with his stuffed wolf clutched against his chest, I am trying to find the words to explain that the dark-eyed man who will be appearing in our doorway within the next hour, holding God knows what kind of gift, because men like him never arrive empty-handed, is not a stranger at all, but rather the most dangerous truth I have ever had to tell, the secret I have kept locked away in the deepest part of my heart, where even I was afraid to examine it too closely for fear of what it might mean, what it might require of me, what it might cost us both if I ever let it out into the light. I have rehearsed this conversation 100 different ways in my mind since his father left last night, have tried every possible combination of words that might make sense to a 3-year-old child who understands the world in simple terms of good and bad, safe and scary, mine and not mine. But every version feels inadequate, feels like I am about to shatter something precious in the act of trying to expand it, like I am about to introduce complexity into a life that has been blissfully, protectively simple, precisely because I worked so hard to keep it that way. Maria is already awake in the kitchen, the smell of coffee and fresh bread filling the apartment with a domestic normalcy that feels almost surreal given what is about to happen, given that in less than 60 minutes, our carefully constructed world is going to tilt on its axis, and nothing will ever be quite the same again. And when I emerge from Luca's room, after spending far too long just watching him sleep and trying to memorize this last moment of before, she looks at me with an expression that is equal parts sympathy and concern and something that might be resignation, as if she has already accepted that this is happening whether she approves or not, whether she thinks I am making a catastrophic mistake or not, whether she believes that men like him can be trusted with precious things like children or not. "You need to eat something," she says, pushing a plate toward me across the counter, and I want to tell her that the thought of food right now makes my stomach turn, that I am so tense with anticipation and dread that I feel like I might shatter if I try to do something as mundane as eat breakfast. But I also know that she is right, that I need to be strong for what is coming, that Luca will need me to be calm and steady and unshakable even if I feel like I am falling apart inside. I force down a few bites of bread and drink the coffee that is too hot and too bitter, but at least gives me something to do with my hands, something to focus on, besides the relentless ticking of the clock that marks the minutes until he arrives, until I have to face him again in the cold light of morning, and somehow navigate this impossible situation we have created. And I find myself wondering what he is doing right now, whether he slept at all last night, or whether he spent the dark hours the way I did, staring at the ceiling and trying to comprehend the magnitude of what has shifted, what has been revealed, what can never be unknown or unfelt or taken back. My phone buzzes on the counter, and my heart leaps into my throat even though I was expecting this, even though I knew he would reach out this morning to confirm, to coordinate, to begin the careful dance of establishing himself in our lives. And when I look at the screen, I see his message, characteristically brief but weighted with everything unsaid. "I'm bringing breakfast and something for Luca. I'll be there in 20 minutes. 20 minutes feels simultaneously like an eternity, and like no time at all. And I look down at myself and realize that I am still wearing the clothes I slept in, rumpled and inappropriate for the momentous occasion of introducing my son to his father. And I rush to my bedroom to change into something that does not make me look like I am falling apart, even though that is exactly what I am doing, settling finally on jeans and a soft sweater that makes me feel armored somehow, protected, as if the right clothing can shield me from the emotional devastation that I know is coming. I hear Luca stirring in his room, the small sounds of waking that I have learned to interpret over 3 years of being his sole parent, his only protector, his entire world. And I take a deep breath and push open his door to find him sitting up in bed, hair sticking up in every direction, rubbing his eyes with small fists, in that way that never fails to make my heart constrict with love so fierce it is almost painful. "Mama," he says, and his voice is still rough with sleep, still carrying that particular quality of early morning innocence that makes me want to gather him up and run, want to protect him from everything that is about to happen, want to keep him in this bubble of simplicity for just a little while longer, but I cannot, I will not, because I have made this choice and I have to see it through, have to trust that what I am doing is right, even though every instinct I have developed over 3 years of hiding is screaming at me to reconsider. "Good morning, baby," I say, sitting on the edge of his bed and smoothing his wild hair down with a hand that is steadier than I expected, steadier than I feel. And he leans into my touch with that complete trust that children have, that absolute faith that their parents will keep them safe, will make good choices, will not lead them into danger. And I pray silently that I am worthy of that trust, that what I am about to do will not damage him, will not steal the security I have worked so hard to build. "Mama has something to tell you," I begin. And he looks at me with those enormous eyes that are so heartbreakingly familiar, so devastatingly his father's, and I have to swallow past the lump in my throat before I can continue. "Someone very special is coming to visit us this morning. Someone who cares about you very much. Someone who has been waiting a long time to meet you," I say, and I watch as curiosity and a hint of wariness flicker across his small face, because he has inherited both of our survival instincts, both of our abilities to sense when something important is happening, even if he does not fully understand what it is. "Who is it?" he asks, and the question is so simple, so innocent, and yet it carries the weight of everything I have been avoiding, everything I have been protecting him from, everything I am about to reveal. "His name is Alexei," I say, and hearing his name spoken aloud in the context of our son feels surreal. Feels like I am bridging 2 worlds that were never meant to touch. "And he is Mama's. He used to be very important to Mama, and he wants to be important to you too, if you will let him." It is not the whole truth, not yet. But it is as much as I can give right now. As much as Luca can process at 3 years old. And I watch as he considers this information with that serious expression he gets when he is thinking hard about something. That stillness that is pure Alexei, even though he has never met his father, has never seen that particular quality reflected back at him except in mirrors. "Is he nice?" Luca asks, and the question breaks my heart because it is so perfectly childlike, so focused on the only thing that really matters to someone his age, whether this new person will be kind or scary, friendly or threatening. And I realize that I am about to lie to him, or at least tell him a version of the truth that is so incomplete it might as well be a lie. Because nice is not a word I would ever use to describe Alexei. Dangerous and ruthless and absolutely devoted to protecting what is his would be more accurate. But those are not concepts that translate well to 3-year-olds. "He is very nice to people he cares about," I settle on, which is true enough. "And he cares about you very much, even though he has not met you yet, because you are special and important, and he has been looking forward to this day for a long time." The doorbell rings, soft and unassuming, and my heart starts racing, because he is here. He is actually here. and there is no more time to prepare, no more time to rehearse what I will say or how I will act. No more time to do anything except open that door and let whatever is going to happen happen. And I look at Luca with what I hope is an encouraging smile and say, "That's him now? Would you like to come meet him, or would you like to finish waking up first?" Giving him some small measure of control over this situation, even though we both know that this meeting is inevitable, that it is going to happen whether he feels ready or not, whether I feel ready or not, whether any of us are prepared for the seismic shift that is about to occur. "I want to meet him," Luca says with a bravery that makes me absurdly proud, and he slides out of bed and slips his small hand into mine, and together we walk down the hallway, toward the front door, where Alexei is waiting on the other side, waiting to meet his son for the first time in waking daylight, waiting to begin building something that neither of us knows how to build, waiting to become a father in more than just biological fact. I open the door, and there he is, looking somehow both exactly as he did last night and completely different, dressed in what must be his version of casual clothing, though it probably costs more than my entire wardrobe combined, and cradled in his arms is a stuffed animal so enormous that it must have required its own seat in his car. A black wolf with silver-tipped fur and intelligent glass eyes that I know immediately is meant to be a companion to the threadbare creature that Luca sleeps with every night. A bridge between his old life and this new one that is beginning right now. "Hello, Luca," Alexei says, and his voice is softer than I have ever heard it. Gentler, carefully, modulated to be non-threatening. And he does something I have never seen him do before, something that seems almost impossible given his height and his build and his general aura of barely contained danger. He kneels down on our doorstep, making himself small, making himself less intimidating, making himself approachable for a 3-year-old who is regarding him with a mixture of curiosity and uncertainty from the safety of his position slightly behind my legs. "My name is Alexei, and I brought you a friend," he continues, holding out the enormous stuffed wolf. "His name is Shadow, and he is a protector just like your wolf, and I thought maybe they could be friends, and maybe you and I could be friends too, if you would like that." I watch as Luca's eyes go wide at the sight of the stuffed animal, which is truly magnificent in a way that only unlimited resources can achieve, with fur that looks almost real and careful attention to anatomical detail that suggests Alexei researched wolves before selecting this particular toy. And I see the moment when curiosity begins to override caution, when the appeal of the gift starts to break down the walls of stranger danger that I have so carefully constructed. Luca takes a tentative step forward, then another, and reaches out one small hand to touch the wolf's fur, testing its softness, and Alexei remains perfectly still, barely breathing, letting our son come to him at his own pace, and I realize that somehow, impossibly, he understands instinctively what is needed here, understands that pushing too hard or moving too fast will shatter this fragile beginning before it has a chance to take root. "He's soft," Luca says, and there is wonder in his voice, the kind of pure delight that children express when confronted with something that exceeds their expectations. And Alexei's face transforms in a way that makes my chest tight, makes my eyes burn with tears I refuse to shed, because I have never seen him smile like that, have never seen that particular combination of joy and relief and desperate hope that is written across his features as clearly as if he has no idea how to hide what he is feeling, as if the presence of his son has stripped away every defense he has ever built. "He is very soft," Alexei agrees, "and very brave, just like you, and he will keep you safe at night when you are sleeping, just like your other wolf does, and they can take turns protecting you so neither of them gets too tired." The logic of this clearly appeals to Luca, who has always been concerned about whether his beloved stuffed animal gets enough rest, whether it gets tired from the constant job of keeping nightmares away, and he takes the enormous wolf from Alexei's arms with a grunt of effort, because it is nearly as big as he is, and hugs it fiercely, burying his face in the soft fur in that way children have of forming instant, passionate attachments to new favorite things. "Thank you," he says, muffled by wolf fur, and Alexi's expression becomes even more unguarded, even more vulnerable, and I realize that he is being destroyed and rebuilt simultaneously by these small moments, these tiny interactions that mean everything, that are the foundation of whatever relationship they will build together. "You are very welcome," Alexi says, and then he looks up at me, still kneeling on the doorstep, and there is a question in his eyes, a request for permission to enter not just our home but our lives, and I nod and step back, opening the door wider, and he rises to his full height and steps across the threshold carrying bags that I can now see contain what appears to be enough breakfast to feed a small army. Because of course he has brought too much. Of course he has overdone it. Because men like him do not know how to do things by half measures. Do not know how to be subtle or restrained when it comes to the things they care about. Maria appears from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel and regarding Alexei with an expression that is not quite hostile but certainly not welcoming. And I watch as he meets her gaze steadily, unflinching, acknowledging her protective instincts without backing down from them, and something passes between them. Some wordless communication that I am not privy to. And finally Maria nods once, sharp and definitive, as if granting him provisional acceptance, as if saying that she will be watching, will be judging, will be ready to remove him forcibly if he proves unworthy of the trust I am placing in him. We settle around the kitchen table in a configuration that feels both natural and completely surreal. Luca chattering excitedly about his new wolf and asking rapid-fire questions about where it came from and whether it has a favorite food and whether it likes to play the same games as his other wolf. And Alexei answers each question with a patience and attention that surprises me, that makes me realize he has been thinking about this, preparing for this, imagining what it would be like to talk to his son and wanting desperately to get it right, to not mess this up, to build something solid from this fragile beginning. I watch the way he looks at Luca, the way his eyes track every movement, every expression, the way he seems to be memorizing details and cataloging them, learning our son the way he has learned everything else in his life, with intense focus and absolute dedication. And I find myself softening toward him, despite my reservations, despite my fears, despite everything that tells me this is dangerous and complicated and probably going to end in heartbreak. "Do you have a little boy?" Luca asks suddenly, innocently, between bites of the ridiculously elaborate pastries that Alexei has brought from what must be the most expensive bakery in the city. And the question lands like a bomb in the middle of our careful conversation, detonating the fragile peace we have established and forcing us to confront the truth that we have been dancing around, the revelation that I both desperately want to delay and know cannot be avoided forever. I see Alexei freeze, see him look at me with an expression that asks clearly what he should say, how much he should reveal, whether this is the moment or whether we should wait. And I realize that we are at a crossroads, that what happens in the next few seconds will set the tone for everything that follows, will establish whether we are going to build this relationship on honesty or on convenient half-truths. I nod, just slightly, giving him permission, giving him the green light to tell our son the truth even though I am terrified of how Luca will react, of whether he will understand, of whether this will be too much too soon. And I watch as Alexei takes a breath, sets down his coffee cup with hands that are not quite steady, and turns his full attention to Luca with an intensity that would be overwhelming if it were directed at anyone other than his own child. "I do now," he says carefully, clearly, and I can hear the emotion threading through his voice even though he is trying to stay calm, trying to be steady for Luca's sake. "I have a little boy who is very brave and very smart, and who likes wolves, and his name is Luca. And I have been looking forward to meeting him for a very long time, because he is my son, which means I am his papa, which means we belong to each other in a very special way." The silence that follows is profound and terrifying, and I watch as Luca processes this information, as his small face scrunches up in concentration, as he looks between Alexei and me as if trying to determine whether this is true, whether this makes sense, whether this stranger can really be the papa he has sometimes asked about, the missing piece that he has noticed without fully understanding its absence. "You are my papa?" he asks finally, testing the words, and Alexei nods, and I can see that he is barely holding himself together, that this moment is costing him everything he has, every ounce of control and composure he has built over a lifetime of needing to be strong, to be unshakable, to be invulnerable. "Yes," Alexei says, and his voice breaks slightly on the word, cracks just enough that I can hear the raw emotion beneath it. "If you will have me, if you will let me, I would very much like to be your papa, to spend time with you and get to know you and be part of your life, because you are the most important thing in the world to me even though we are just meeting, because you are mine and I am yours, and that is something that nothing can change, not distance or time or anything else." It is perhaps too much information for a 3-year-old, too heavy, too intense, but Luca seems to understand on some instinctive level that what is being offered here is significant, is permanent, is the answer to questions he has been asking in his own childish way for as long as he has been able to form words. "Okay," Luca says, with the simple acceptance that children have, the ability to embrace enormous changes with a shrug and a smile as long as they feel safe, as long as their fundamental security is not threatened. And then he adds, testing the word, trying it out, "Papa." And I watch as Alexei closes his eyes for just a moment, as his hands curl into fists on the table, as he visibly struggles to maintain his composure in the face of hearing his son call him by that name for the first time. And when he opens his eyes again, they are suspiciously bright, and he reaches across the table with one large hand and very gently ruffles Luca's hair in a gesture that is tender and possessive and absolutely right. The rest of breakfast passes in a blur of conversation and laughter and slowly building comfort as Luca warms to Alexei's presence, as the initial strangeness wears off and is replaced by cautious curiosity. And I watch as my son begins to orbit closer to his father, begins to show him his favorite toys, and explain the complex rules of the games he has invented. And Alexei listens with an attention that is total and undivided, that makes it clear that nothing else in the world matters right now except this small person who is gradually, tentatively, beginning to trust him. Maria catches my eye from across the kitchen, where she is washing dishes with more vigor than strictly necessary, and she shakes her head slightly. And I cannot tell if it is disapproval or resignation, or some complicated mixture of both. But I also know that she sees what I see, that Alexei is good with Luca, that there is something natural in the way they are beginning to interact, that despite everything that makes this situation impossibly complicated, there is also something right about it. Something that feels like pieces clicking into place after years of being scattered. My phone vibrates in my pocket, and I pull it out to see a text from an unknown number, and my blood runs cold as I read the words that appear on the screen. "We know where you are. We know about the boy. Tell Volkov that running won't save you this time. The Velasco family remembers, and we are coming to collect what is owed." The message is like ice water down my spine, like a physical blow that steals my breath. And I must make some sound, because suddenly Alexei is beside me, taking the phone from my trembling hands, reading the message with an expression that goes from concerned to absolutely murderous in the space of a heartbeat. And I watch as every soft, gentle human quality that I have been observing all morning vanishes behind a mask of cold fury that reminds me exactly who and what he is capable of when someone threatens what belongs to him. "Take Luca to his room," he says, and his voice is completely different now, stripped of all warmth, all gentleness, all of the careful patience he has been displaying, replaced by the tone of command that expects instant obedience. And I do not argue, do not question, because I can see that he has shifted into a different mode, that the father has been temporarily set aside, and the dangerous man has emerged. And I gather Luca up despite his protests about wanting to show Papa his dinosaur collection and carry him to his bedroom, closing the door behind us and trying to keep my hands from shaking as I hear Alexei's voice from the other room, low and lethal, speaking in rapid Russian into his phone, issuing orders that I can only partially understand, but that I know mean violence, mean retribution, mean that whatever fragile peace we have been building this morning is about to be shattered by the reality of the world he inhabits. The world that I ran from. The world that has apparently found us again despite all my efforts to stay hidden, to stay safe, to keep Luca away from exactly this kind of danger. "Mama, what is wrong?" Luca asks, picking up on my fear with that uncanny ability children have to sense when their parents are frightened, and I force myself to smile, to smooth his hair, to lie with a confidence I do not feel. "Nothing is wrong, baby. Papa just needs to make some phone calls for his work, and then everything will be fine. I promise." But even as I say it, even as I try to project calm and certainty, I know that everything has changed. That the threat I have been running from for 3 years has finally caught up with us. And now, the only thing standing between my son and the people who want to hurt us is the man I let into our lives this morning. The man who is currently transforming our kitchen into a war room. The man who I have to trust will keep us safe, even though trusting him means accepting that violence and bloodshed are about to become part of our reality in ways I cannot control or prevent. And I find myself wondering, not for the first time, and certainly not for the last, whether opening that door last night was an act of bravery or the biggest mistake I have ever made, and whether I will even survive long enough to find out which. The house has 17 exits that I have counted obsessively in the 3 days since we moved in. Bulletproof windows that are masked so perfectly as regular glass that I would never have known the difference if Alexei had not taken me on a methodical tour of every security feature while Luca napped on our first afternoon here, and a panic room hidden behind what looks like an ordinary linen closet, but which contains enough supplies to keep us alive for 72 hours in the event of a siege. Though when I asked him what kind of threat would require us to hide for 3 days, he simply looked at me with those dark, unreadable eyes and said that hope for the best but prepare for the worst was the philosophy that had kept him alive this long, and he was not about to abandon it now that he had people who mattered more than his own survival. It also has a yellow bedroom with hand-painted clouds on the ceiling that Alexei commissioned from an artist whose work apparently hangs in museums, a backyard with a treehouse that was built with the kind of structural integrity that could probably withstand a hurricane, and a kitchen that smells like cinnamon rolls every morning, because he has hired a cook who specializes in making a home feel warm and lived in and safe, as if the right smells and the right food could somehow counteract the reality that we are living in what amounts to a fortress disguised as a family home. And I used to think that safety and happiness were 2 different things, 2 separate goals that could never quite overlap. But Alexei is teaching me through actions rather than words that they can be the same. That protection does not have to feel like imprisonment if it is given with love rather than control. Though I am still learning to distinguish between the two. Still learning to trust that the walls he has built around us are meant to keep danger out, rather than to keep us in. Maria moves through the space with the same suspicious efficiency she brought to our tiny apartment, inspecting every corner and crevice as if she expects to find listening devices, or hidden cameras, or some evidence that this generosity comes with strings attached in ways that we have not yet discovered. And I cannot entirely blame her for her paranoia, because I feel it too. This sense that something this perfect cannot possibly be real, cannot possibly last, cannot possibly be given, without some expectation of payment that will eventually come due in ways I cannot anticipate. She has her own suite of rooms on the ground floor, a fact that surprised both of us because Alexei had simply announced on moving day that she was part of our family and therefore part of this arrangement. And when she tried to protest, tried to insist that she had her own life and her own apartment and did not need his charity, he had looked at her with an expression that was both respectful and immovable, and said that Luca loved her, that Elena trusted her, and that he would not feel comfortable knowing that she was living alone and unprotected when the Velasco family had already demonstrated that they knew how to find us. And there was something in the way he said it. Some combination of genuine concern and absolute certainty that made even Maria's formidable resistance crumble, though she still watches him with hawk-like intensity whenever he is near Luca, as if waiting for him to reveal his true nature, to prove that men like him cannot really change, cannot really be trusted with precious, innocent things. Luca has adapted to this new reality with the remarkable resilience of childhood, treating the move as an adventure rather than an upheaval, delighted by the space to run and play, enchanted by the treehouse that his papa built for him with his own hands over 2 sleepless nights, because he wanted Luca to have something that came from him personally rather than from his money or his power. And I had watched from the kitchen window as Alexei worked in the floodlit backyard, measuring and hammering and sanding with a focus that bordered on obsessive. And I realized that he was building more than just a structure for our son to play in. He was building proof of his commitment, evidence that he was willing to do the hard, physical labor of being a father, willing to create something with his hands that would make Luca smile. And when it was finished, and Luca climbed up the ladder for the first time, and his face lit up with pure joy, I saw Alexei's shoulders relax in a way that told me he had been terrified that it would not be good enough, that Luca would somehow be disappointed, that he would fail at this crucial test of worthiness. We have fallen into something that almost resembles a routine, though it is a routine punctuated by moments that remind me we are not a normal family and never will be. Moments like when Alexei's phone rings with a particular tone that makes his entire demeanor change, makes him excuse himself with a kiss to Luca's head, and a meaningful look at me that says he needs to handle something, needs to step back into the other part of his life, the part that exists in shadows and violence and decisions that I do not want to know about in detail, but that I understand are necessary to maintain the safety of this bubble he has created for us. He always returns within an hour, always comes to find us wherever we are in the house, always needs to see with his own eyes that we are safe and whole and untouched by whatever darkness he has just been dealing with. And sometimes there is blood on his cuffs that he thinks I do not notice. Sometimes there is a tension in his jaw that speaks of violence recently committed. Sometimes there is a haunted look in his eyes that makes me want to hold him and ask him what it costs to be what he is, to do what he does, to carry the weight of keeping us safe in a world that wants to hurt us. But I do not ask because I am not sure I want to know the answer. Not sure I am ready to fully comprehend the price he pays so that Luca can play in his treehouse without fear. This morning, I wake to the sound of voices downstairs, Alexei's deep rumble punctuated by Luca's higher, excited chatter, and I lie in bed for a moment listening to them, listening to my son call this dangerous, complicated man Papa as naturally as breathing, listening to Alexei respond with a patience and gentleness that still surprises me every single time I witness it. And I feel something in my chest that might be happiness or might be terror, or might be some complicated combination of both. Because this is what I wanted and what I feared in equal measure, this integration of Alexei into our lives, this transformation of him from the monster of my nightmares into the man making breakfast with our son. When I finally make my way downstairs, still in pajamas because this house feels safe enough for that kind of casual intimacy, I find them in the kitchen, surrounded by what appears to be the aftermath of an ambitious cooking project. Flour dusting the counters and Luca's nose, chocolate chips scattered across every surface, and Alexei is wearing an apron that says "World's Best Dad," which I know for a fact he did not own before this moment, which means someone on his staff went out and purchased it, probably at his direction. Probably because he is trying so desperately hard to be what Luca needs that he is willing to wear ridiculous aprons and get flour in his expensive hair and pretend that he knows what he is doing, when I can tell from the state of the kitchen that this is his first attempt at baking with a 3-year-old. "Mama, we are making cookies," Luca announces with the kind of enthusiasm that only children can muster at 7 in the morning, and he holds up his hands, which are covered in dough and chocolate and what might be butter. And Alexei looks at me over our son's head with an expression that is part pride and part desperation and part plea for help. And I laugh because I cannot help it. Because the sight of this man who commands empires being defeated by cookie dough is so absurd and so endearing that it breaks through the careful distance I have been trying to maintain, the walls I have been trying to keep up between us even as we live in the same house and parent the same child, and slowly, inexorably, fall back into the gravitational pull of whatever it is that has always existed between us. I can see that, I say, moving into the kitchen and surveying the damage. And how is that going for you? Directing the question at Alexei, who has the grace to look sheepish, who shrugs in that way that suggests he knows he is in over his head, but is too stubborn to admit defeat. We may have underestimated the complexity of the recipe, he admits, and there is something in his voice that is self-deprecating and warm, and so unlike the cold, controlled man I used to know that I have to look away, have to busy myself with finding the actual recipe that they have clearly abandoned in favor of creative improvisation. And I spend the next hour helping them salvage what turns out to be surprisingly decent chocolate chip cookies despite the chaotic process. And I watch as Alexei learns to measure ingredients and follow instructions and accept guidance from someone else. And I realize that this is harder for him than any business negotiation or territorial dispute. This surrender of control, this admission that he does not know everything, this vulnerability of being a beginner at something that matters. When the cookies finally emerge from the oven, golden and fragrant and lumpy in the way that homemade cookies should be, Luca insists that we all sit down and taste them together. And we do, the three of us around the kitchen table that is still dusted with flour, eating warm cookies and drinking cold milk. And it is so painfully, perfectly domestic that I feel tears prickling at the corners of my eyes and have to blink them away before either of them notice. The illusion of normalcy shatters when Alexei's phone rings with that particular tone, when his expression shifts from relaxed to alert in the space between one heartbeat and the next. When he looks at me with apology already forming in his eyes and says, "I need to take this," in a voice that has gone flat and professional, and empty of all the warmth that was there moments ago. He steps out onto the back porch, closing the door behind him, but not before I catch a glimpse of the way his shoulders tense, the way his free hand curls into a fist, the way his entire body language changes to accommodate whatever threat or crisis or situation is unfolding on the other end of that call. And I am left at the table with Luca, who seems unbothered by his father's departure, who simply reaches for another cookie and chatters about the treehouse, and whether Shadow and his other wolf might like to have a tea party up there this afternoon. And I make appropriate responses, while part of my attention is fixed on the man pacing the porch, speaking in rapid, harsh Russian, giving orders that I can hear the shape of even if I cannot make out the specific words. He is gone for 20 minutes, and when he returns, there is something different about him. Something colder. Something that makes me understand viscerally why people fear him, why his name is spoken in certain circles with the kind of reverence reserved for natural disasters and acts of God. And he comes to where Luca is playing with his wolves on the kitchen floor and kneels down. And I watch as he visibly softens himself, as he pushes down whatever darkness he was just swimming in and reaches for the gentleness that he reserves only for our son. "Papa has to go to work," he says, and Luca's face falls in that dramatic way that children's faces do, that exaggerated disappointment that is nonetheless entirely genuine, and Alexei reaches out to cup his small face in one large hand. "But I will be back before dinner, and then we can play in the treehouse for as long as you want, I promise." Luca accepts this with the trust that Alexei has been carefully building over these last few days, accepts the promise without question, without doubt. And Alexei stands and looks at me with an expression that asks if I understand, if I accept this, if I am willing to let him go do whatever terrible thing he needs to do to keep us safe. And I nod because what choice do I have? What choice have I ever had, except to trust that he knows what he is doing? That the violence he commits is necessary? That the monster he becomes when he walks out that door is the price we pay for the man he is when he is here with us? After he leaves, after the sound of his car fading down the driveway has been swallowed by the quiet of the neighborhood, I find myself standing at the window of what has become my favorite room, a sunroom filled with light and plants and the art, supplies that appeared one morning without explanation, and I am staring at a blank canvas trying to find the words, or the images, to express what it feels like to live in this strange liminal space between safety and danger, between love and fear, between the man who makes cookies with our son and the man who does things I cannot let myself think about too closely. Maria finds me there an hour later, still staring at the empty white space, and she sits down in the chair beside me, and we exist in silence for a long moment before she speaks. "You are falling for him again," she says, and it is not a question but an observation, a statement of fact that I cannot deny even though I want to, even though I have been telling myself that I am simply being practical, simply accepting the reality of our situation, simply making the best of circumstances that are outside my control. I never stopped, I admit, because what is the point of lying to Maria, who has known me through the worst of it, who held me while I cried for a man I had chosen to leave, who watched me build a life without him, and knew the entire time that I was only half alive, only going through the motions, only pretending that I was complete when the truth was that a crucial piece of me was missing and would always be missing as long as he was not in my life. That has always been the problem, I continue. Loving him was never hard. It was the easiest thing I ever did, easier than breathing, easier than existing, and leaving him nearly killed me. And being back in his orbit, being in his house, watching him with our son, it is like remembering how to be fully alive after years of only half existing. And I am terrified because I know what he is. I know what he does. I know that the hands that hold Luca so gently have also done terrible things. And I do not know how to reconcile those two versions of him. Do not know how to love the father without accepting the monster. Do not know if it is even possible to separate them, or if they are so intrinsically linked that I have to accept both or have neither. Maria regards me with those sharp eyes that miss nothing, that have seen too much of life to be shocked or scandalized by anything, and she reaches over to take my hand in hers, her grip warm and steady and grounding. "Then you have already made your choice," she says. "Whether you want to admit it or not, you have chosen him, chosen this life, chosen to trust that he will keep you safe even though safety in his world looks different than safety in the world you tried to build for yourself and Luca. And now, you have to decide if you are going to embrace that choice, or if you are going to spend the rest of your life fighting against it, resenting it, wishing you had made a different decision, because I can tell you from experience that there is no peace in constantly questioning the path you have taken, no happiness in looking backward instead of forward, no future in refusing to accept the present for what it is rather than what you wish it could be." Her words settle into me with the weight of truth, uncomfortable and undeniable. And I know she is right. Know that I have been existing in this state of perpetual ambivalence, one foot in and one foot out, ready to run at the first sign of danger while simultaneously sinking roots deeper into this life every day. And I cannot continue like this. Cannot continue to hold myself apart from what is happening. Cannot continue to pretend that I am just going along with this for Luca's sake, when the truth is that I want this, want him, want the life we are building even with all its complications and dangers and moral ambiguities. "I am afraid," I whisper, giving voice to the fear that has been sitting on my chest since the moment I told him about Luca, since the moment I opened that door and let him back into our lives. Afraid that I am making the same mistake I made before. Afraid that loving him will destroy me. Afraid that something will happen to him, or to Luca, or to all of us because I was selfish enough to want something I have no right to have. Because I was foolish enough to believe that men like him can have families, can have normal lives, can have anything other than violence and death and loneliness. "Everyone is afraid," Maria says with a pragmatism that is somehow comforting in its bluntness. "Anyone who tells you they are not afraid when they love someone is either lying or has never really loved at all. Because love is terrifying, is the act of giving someone the power to destroy you and trusting that they will not. Or if they do, it will be by accident rather than by design. And yes, he is dangerous. Yes, he lives in a world where violence is common and death is always a possibility. But he is also a man who built a treehouse with his own hands for a son he barely knows, who wears ridiculous aprons and makes cookies at dawn, who looks at you like you are the answer to a question he has been asking his entire life. And maybe that is enough. Maybe that has to be enough, because the alternative is to walk away, to take Luca and run again, to spend the rest of your life wondering what might have been if you had been brave enough to stay, brave enough to choose love over fear, brave enough to believe that sometimes the monster and the man can coexist in the same body, and that the man is strong enough to keep the monster from hurting the people he loves. I want to argue with her, want to point out all the ways this could go wrong, all the reasons why trusting him is dangerous, all the evidence that men like him do not change, do not soften, do not become safe just because they have fallen in love. But before I can formulate a response, before I can give voice to any of my objections, Luca bursts into the room with the kind of energy that only 3-year-olds possess, dragging both his wolves behind him and announcing that they are hungry and need a tea party immediately, and that both Mama and Maria are required to attend. We allow ourselves to be dragged into his imaginary world, setting up an elaborate tea party in the treehouse that involves crackers and juice boxes, and a level of dramatic role-playing that Luca directs with the iron will of a tiny dictator, and I find myself laughing genuinely for the first time in days, find myself relaxing into this moment of pure, uncomplicated joy, find myself thinking that maybe Maria is right, maybe this is enough, maybe the moments of happiness are worth the moments of fear, maybe loving Alexei and building this life is not a mistake, but the bravest thing I have ever done. The afternoon drifts into evening, the light turning golden and soft as it filters through the leaves of the massive oak tree that supports the treehouse, and I am reading to Luca from one of his favorite books about wolves and forests and adventures, when I hear the car in the driveway, hear the sound of Alexei returning, and Luca immediately abandons the story and scrambles down the treehouse ladder with the kind of reckless speed that makes my heart leap into my throat, calling "Papa, Papa," as he runs across the yard toward the man emerging from the car. And I watch from my elevated vantage point as Alexei catches him, swings him up into his arms, buries his face in Luca's neck as if breathing him in, as if reassuring himself that we are here and safe and real, and there is something about the gesture, something about the desperate relief in the way he holds our son that tells me whatever he dealt with today was worse than usual, was dangerous in ways that frightened even him, was close enough to disaster that coming home to find us whole and happy is not just a comfort, but a necessity. When they make their way to the treehouse, when Alexei climbs up with Luca still in his arms, despite the fact that our son is perfectly capable of climbing on his own, I see the exhaustion in his face, the lines around his eyes that were not there this morning, the tension in his shoulders that he is trying to hide but cannot quite manage to eliminate. And when Luca immediately launches into an enthusiastic recap of the tea party and the games and everything Papa missed while he was at work, Alexei listens with complete attention, responding appropriately, asking follow-up questions, giving no indication that anything is wrong except for the way his free hand keeps finding me, keeps reaching out to touch my knee, my arm, my hand, as if he needs the physical confirmation of my presence, needs to know that I am here and solid and not going anywhere. After Luca has exhausted his story and returned to playing with his wolves, creating an elaborate scenario that involves a quest and a dragon and a princess who needs rescuing, Alexei moves closer to me on the treehouse floor, and his voice when he speaks is low enough that only I can hear. There was an attempt today. The words send ice through my veins, send my heart racing even though I am trying to stay calm, trying not to let Luca see my fear. And I turn to look at Alexei with wide eyes, with 1,000 questions I cannot ask out loud, and he continues in that same low, controlled voice that is at odds with the gravity of what he is telling me. The Velasco family sent 3 men to one of my businesses, thinking I would be there, thinking they could use me to get to you, but I was not there, my people were, and they handled it. But Elena, they are not going to stop. They are going to keep coming until they get what they want, or until I eliminate the threat permanently. And I need you to know that I am working on the latter, that I have people tracking down every member of their organization, that I am building a case for why they need to disappear from this earth. But it takes time. It takes planning. It takes making sure that when I move against them, there is no possibility of retaliation, no chance that they can hurt you or Luca even in their death throes. And I need you to trust me. Need you to believe that I will keep you safe even though I know trust is hard for you. Even though I know I have not earned it yet. Even though I know that every day you stay here you are taking a leap of faith that I will not let you fall. I stare at him. At this man who is confessing his fears and his plans with equal weight. Who is asking for my trust while simultaneously admitting that the danger is real and immediate and possibly insurmountable. And I realize that this is the moment Maria was talking about. This is the choice I have to make. To trust him or to run. To believe that he can protect us, or to accept that nowhere is safe and we might as well be here, with him, rather than alone and vulnerable in some new city where the Velasco family will eventually find us anyway, because they have already proven they can. What do you need from me? I ask, and the question surprises him. I can see it in the way his eyebrows lift slightly, in the way his grip on my hand tightens, and I realize he was expecting me to panic, to demand that he find a way to make this go away immediately, to blame him for the danger his existence brings into our lives. But I am not doing any of those things because I understand, finally, that we are in this together, that Luca's safety depends on both of us working in tandem rather than at cross purposes, that my trust is not just a gift I give him, but a strategic necessity in a situation where coordination and unity might be the only things that keep us alive. I need you to follow the security protocols without question, he says. I need you to keep your phone on you at all times. I need you to not leave this property without telling me first. I need you to trust the men I have stationed around the perimeter, even though I know you do not like being watched. I need you to be prepared to take Luca to the panic room if I tell you to, and not ask why or hesitate or try to argue with me in the moment, because if it gets to that point, if I am telling you to hide, it means that something has gone very wrong and seconds will matter in ways that you cannot imagine and I cannot explain without terrifying you. And most of all, I need you to believe that I would die before I let anything happen to either of you. That my life means nothing compared to yours and Luca's. That if it comes down to a choice between my survival and yours, there is no choice at all. And I need you to be okay with that. To accept that this is what it means to be loved by me. To be protected by me. To be mine in all the ways that matter. The intensity of his words, the absolute certainty with which he speaks, makes it hard to breathe, makes my chest tight with emotions I cannot name, and I want to tell him that I am not okay with him dying, that the thought of losing him now that I have him back is unbearable, that Luca needs his father, and I need whatever it is we are building together. But before I can say any of that, before I can give voice to the tangle of fear and love and desperate hope that is churning inside me, Luca looks up from his wolves and says with perfect, innocent timing, "Papa, are you going to stay for dinner? Mama makes the best spaghetti, and Maria says we are having it tonight, and you should stay because it is better when you are here. Everything is better when you are here." And the simplicity of the statement, the unconscious truth of it, breaks something open in both of us. And I watch as Alexei's expression softens, as he reaches out to pull Luca into his lap, as he says, "Yes, little wolf, I am staying for dinner, and for dessert, and for bedtime stories, and for as long as you and Mama will have me, because you are right. Everything is better when we are together, and I am never, never going to choose to be anywhere other than here with you if I can help it." And as we sit there in the treehouse, the three of us tangled together in the golden evening light, with the threat of violence hanging over us like a sword suspended by the thinnest thread and the promise of family wrapping around us like armor, I realize that I have made my choice, that I am choosing this, choosing him. choosing to believe that love can exist alongside danger, that protection can feel like freedom if it is given with respect rather than control, that maybe, just maybe, we can build something beautiful and lasting even in the shadow of the darkness that surrounds us. And as Alexei's arms come around both me and Luca, as I feel the solid strength of him and the precious warmth of our son, I allow myself to hope that we might actually survive this, that we might actually get our happy ending despite all the reasons why we should not. And that hope, fragile and fierce and terrifying in its intensity, is the bravest thing I have ever allowed myself to feel, because hoping means believing in a future, means investing in tomorrow, means accepting that the risk of loss is worth the possibility of love. And for the first time in 3 years, I find myself believing that it might actually be true, that we might actually make it, that the life we are building in this fortress disguised as a home might actually be the beginning of something extraordinary rather than the prelude to disaster. And as the sun sets and we climb down from the treehouse to go inside for dinner, I hold that hope close to my chest like a secret, like a prayer, like a promise I am making to myself and to them that I am done running, done hiding, done being afraid, and that whatever comes next, we will face it together, as a family, because that is what we are now. Impossibly, miraculously, despite everything that should make it impossible, and nothing, not the Velasco family, not Alexei's dangerous world, not my own fears, is going to take that away from us without the fight of a lifetime. There is a moment in every fairy tale where you realize the monster was just misunderstood, that beneath the scales and scars and the reputation built on fear, there exists something worth saving, something worth reaching for even when every rational voice in your head screams that touching the beast will get you burned. But this is not a fairy tale, and Alexei is not misunderstood in the slightest because he is exactly as dangerous as everyone says, exactly as capable of violence as his reputation suggests, exactly as ruthless as the stories whispered in dark corners would have you believe. And yet now I have seen him read bedtime stories in different voices for each character, until Luca dissolves into giggles. Now I have watched him teach our son to tie his shoes with infinite patience even when it takes 45 minutes, and we are already late for the dinner he has planned. Now I know that monsters can love fiercely enough to become men, or perhaps more accurately, that men can be monsters in their professional lives and fathers in their personal ones, and that duality, that ability to compartmentalize in ways that should be impossible, terrifies me more than any weapon he has ever carried, because it means I can never fully predict which version of him will emerge in any given situation, can never be entirely certain where the line is between the man who makes dinosaur-shaped pancakes and the one who comes home with blood on his cuffs that he thinks I do not notice. 3 months have passed since we moved into this beautiful prison that Alexei built for us. 3 months of slowly, inexorably settling into a rhythm that feels almost normal, if you do not look too closely at the armed guards disguised as landscapers, or the sophisticated alarm system that tracks every entry and exit, or the way Alexei's phone still rings at odd hours with that particular tone that makes his jaw tighten and his eyes go cold. And in those 3 months, I have watched our son blossom in ways that make my chest ache with a complicated mixture of joy and guilt. Joy because he is happy and secure and thriving under the attention of a father who is utterly devoted to him. Guilt because I kept them apart for 3 years out of fear that has proven to be both justified and ultimately insufficient to keep us safe anyway. Luca has grown comfortable enough with Alexei to climb into his lap without hesitation, to demand his attention with the imperious confidence of a child who knows he is loved unconditionally, to call him Papa with the same easy affection he reserves for me. And watching them together is simultaneously the most beautiful and most terrifying thing I have ever experienced, because the bond they are building is so strong, so deep, so fundamentally unbreakable that I know if something were to happen to Alexei, if the violence of his world were to finally catch up with him in a way that even his considerable power and resources cannot deflect, it would shatter our son in ways that I might never be able to repair. This morning I wake early, drawn from sleep by some instinct I cannot name. some sense that something is different even though the house is quiet and still, and nothing appears to be wrong. And I slip out of bed without waking Alexei, who is sprawled across his side of the mattress in a rare moment of unguarded rest, his face soft in sleep in a way it never is when he is awake, and I pad barefoot through the hallway to check on Luca, compelled by that parental paranoia that never fully sleeps, that always hovers at the edge of consciousness, ready to leap into action at the slightest indication of danger. I find our son sleeping peacefully with both his wolves, the new shadow and the old threadbare one, tucked under his arms, and I stand in his doorway for a long moment just watching the rise and fall of his small chest, just listening to the soft sounds of his breathing, just memorizing this moment of perfect innocence before the day begins and reality reasserts itself with all its complications and dangers. And I find myself whispering a prayer to whatever gods might be listening that I can keep him this safe, this happy, this whole, for as long as possible, that the choices I have made will turn out to be the right ones, that loving Alexei and trusting him with our son's safety will not prove to be the catastrophic error that some part of me still fears it might be. When I return to the bedroom, I find Alexei awake, sitting up against the headboard with an expression that is difficult to read, something troubled and distant and almost vulnerable, and he reaches for me as I approach, pulling me down beside him with a gentleness that contradicts the tension I can feel vibrating through his body. And for a long moment we sit there in the pre-dawn darkness, his arm around my shoulders, my head against his chest, listening to the sound of his heartbeat, which is faster than it should be, more agitated than the peaceful morning would seem to warrant. "I need to tell you something," he says finally, his voice low and rough with sleep and something else. Something that sounds like dread or resignation, or perhaps a combination of both. And my stomach immediately clenches with anxiety, because nothing good has ever followed those particular words. Because I have learned that when he feels the need to prepare me for information, it means that what he is about to say is going to change things in ways I will not like, in ways that will test the fragile trust we have been building over these last 3 months. "The Velasco situation is coming to a head," he continues, and I can feel the way his muscles tense as he speaks, can sense the carefully controlled violence that is always lurking beneath his civilized surface, waiting for an excuse to emerge. And I have been avoiding telling you the details because I did not want to frighten you, did not want you to spend every moment worrying about things you cannot control. But I realize now that was a mistake, that you deserve to know what we are facing, what I am planning to do about it, what the next few weeks are going to look like as this situation reaches its inevitable conclusion. He pauses, takes a breath, and I can feel him gathering himself, preparing to reveal things he has been carefully concealing, and part of me wants to tell him to stop, wants to preserve my ignorance just a little bit longer, wants to exist in the comfortable delusion that everything is fine and we are safe, and the threat is distant and manageable. But I know that is childish. Know that I cannot be a true partner to him if I insist on being protected from the reality of our situation. Know that Maria was right when she said I had to choose to embrace this life fully, or spend the rest of my existence resenting it. Victor Velasco has been consolidating power within his family, Alexei explains, his voice taking on the clinical, detached quality he uses when discussing business, as if creating emotional distance from the subject matter makes it less personal, less dangerous, less likely to consume us all. And he has made it clear that eliminating you, eliminating the witness to his crime, has become a matter of pride for him, a test of his authority within the organization. And as long as you are alive and could potentially testify against him, he is vulnerable, his position is vulnerable, and men like him do not tolerate vulnerability, do not accept loose ends, do not rest until every threat has been neutralized permanently. The way he says permanently sends a chill down my spine, not because I do not understand what he means, but because I understand it perfectly, because I know that in his world neutralized permanently is a euphemism for killed, for disappeared, for made to never have existed in the first place, and the casual way he discusses it, the matter-of-fact acceptance of murder as a solution to problems, reminds me forcefully that no matter how gentle he is with Luca, no matter how patient he is with me. He is still a man, who has killed and will kill again without hesitation if he deems it necessary. I have been patient, he continues, and there is something in his voice now that is darker, more dangerous, the predator emerging from beneath the father's gentle facade. I have been strategic. I have been careful. I have been building my case and gathering my resources and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. But patience has limits. Strategy can only delay the inevitable for so long. And the truth is that Victor made a mistake 3 days ago, made a move that exposed a weakness in his organization that I can exploit. And I am going to do exactly that. I am going to dismantle his entire operation in a single coordinated strike that will leave him with nothing, no power, no protection, no ability to threaten you ever again, and I need you to understand what that means. Need you to accept that what I am about to do is going to be violent and final and will result in the deaths of people who may not deserve to die, but who are nevertheless standing between my family and safety. And I need to know that you can live with that you can accept that this is who I am and what I do, and that sometimes the only way to protect what you love is to destroy what threatens it completely and without mercy. The words hang in the air between us, heavy and irrevocable, and I find myself struggling to process what he is telling me, struggling to reconcile the man who is describing mass murder with the same calm he might use to discuss a business merger with the man who spent 2 hours last night helping Luca build an elaborate blanket fort in the living room. And I realize that this is the fundamental challenge of loving him, this constant negotiation between the two versions of him that exist simultaneously, this perpetual balancing act of accepting the monster while cherishing the man. And I do not know if I am strong enough for it. Do not know if anyone could be strong enough for it. But I also know that I do not have the luxury of weakness. Do not have the option of falling apart. Because Luca needs me to be strong. Needs me to be his anchor in a world that is more complicated and dangerous than he can possibly understand. And if being strong means accepting that his father is going to do terrible things to keep us safe, then that is what I will do. That is the price I will pay for the life we are building together. When? I ask, because I need to know. Need to prepare myself mentally for whatever is coming. Need to have time to process the fact that the man sleeping beside me is about to orchestrate something that will end lives and reshape the criminal landscape of the city, and possibly put himself in danger in ways that he is not telling me about, because he knows I will try to talk him out of it, if I understand the full extent of the risk. And he looks at me with those dark, fathomless eyes that have seen too much violence, that carry too many ghosts, that sometimes, in unguarded moments, reveal a weariness that breaks my heart. Soon, he says, which is not an answer but is apparently all he is willing to give me. Within the week, possibly sooner if the opportunity presents itself before I expect it to. But Elena, I need you to trust that I have planned this carefully, that I have accounted for every variable I can control, that I have backup plans for my backup plans, and that when I move, when this happens, you and Luca will be as protected as it is possible for anyone to be protected in this world. You will have guards who will die before they let anything happen to you. You will have protocols in place that will get you to safety no matter what happens to me. And I need you to promise me that if something goes wrong, if somehow they get through my defenses, and I am not here to protect you, you will take Luca and you will run. You will use the resources I have set aside for exactly this contingency. And you will not look back. Will not waste time mourning me. Will not let sentiment or love or misguided loyalty keep you from doing whatever is necessary to keep our son safe. The thought of losing him, the very real possibility that whatever he is planning could go catastrophically wrong, and I could wake up one morning to find that he is gone, that Luca has lost his father after only just finding him, that I have lost the man I never really stopped loving even when I was running from him, makes me feel like I cannot breathe, makes my chest constrict with a panic that I have to force down through sheer willpower because I cannot fall apart, cannot let him see how terrified I am, cannot give him any reason to hesitate or second-guess or delay what he believes needs to be done because I understand, even if I hate it, that this is the only way, that Victor Velasco will not stop hunting us until one of them is dead. And I would rather live in a world without Victor than in a world without Alexei. Would rather carry the moral weight of whatever he is about to do than lose the fragile, imperfect family we have built together. I cannot promise you that I will not mourn you, I say, my voice breaking slightly despite my best efforts to keep it steady. I cannot promise that losing you would not destroy me in ways that would make it difficult to be what Luca needs. But I can promise that I will keep him safe. That I will run if I have to. That I will do whatever is necessary to make sure that he survives and thrives and grows up to be a good man despite everything. And I can promise that I will tell him about you, about who you really were beneath the reputation, about how much you loved him, about the treehouse and the cookies and the bedtime stories, about all the ways you tried to be a better man than you were raised to be. And I will make sure he knows that everything you did, all the terrible things and all the beautiful things, were done because you loved us more than you loved yourself, more than you loved your own life, more than you loved anything else in this world. He pulls me closer, crushing me against his chest with a desperation that is almost painful, and I can feel the way his heart is racing, can feel the tremor in his hands as they grip my shoulders, can feel the carefully controlled emotion that he is struggling to contain. And when he speaks, his voice is rougher than I have ever heard it, thick with feelings he does not know how to articulate, weighted with the terrible understanding that what he is about to do might cost him everything that matters. I do not deserve you, he whispers into my hair. I do not deserve Luca. I do not deserve this life that you have given me, this chance to be something other than what I was made to be. And the cruelest irony is that just as I have finally found something worth living for, I have to risk losing it all to keep it safe. Have to walk into danger to protect you from danger. Have to become the monster one more time so that Luca can grow up with a father instead of a ghost. And I am terrified, Elena. I am so terrified that I will fail, that I will make a mistake, that I will die and leave you alone again. But I am more terrified of what will happen if I do nothing, if I let Victor continue to exist as a threat, if I allow my fear of death to override my responsibility to protect my family. And so I am going to do what needs to be done, and I am going to survive it, and I am going to come home to you and to Luca, and we are going to have the life we deserve. The peaceful, boring, normal life, where the most dangerous thing I do is attempt to cook dinner without burning down the kitchen. The absurdity of that last image, the idea of Alexei being domestically dangerous rather than actually dangerous, makes me laugh despite the tears that are streaming down my face, despite the terror that is coiling in my stomach like a living thing, despite the certainty that the next few days are going to be some of the longest and most frightening of my life. And he laughs too. A broken, desperate sound that transforms into something that might be a sob. And we cling to each other in the growing dawn light. Two people who have found each other against all odds and all reason, who are building something beautiful in the shadow of violence, who are choosing love even though love makes them vulnerable, makes them targets, makes them terrified in ways they never were when they had nothing to lose. We stay like that until we hear Luca stirring in his room, until the sounds of our son waking pull us back into the roles we need to play. The strong parents, the unshakable foundation, the steady presence that makes him feel safe even when safety is an illusion we are maintaining through sheer force of will. And Alexei kisses me with a tenderness that feels like a promise and a goodbye in equal measure before he pulls away to go make breakfast, to pretend that everything is normal, to give Luca one more perfect day before the world potentially tilts on its axis and everything changes again. The next 3 days pass in a haze of forced normalcy, of playing with Luca in the treehouse and reading stories and baking more cookies and pretending that my heart is not constantly in my throat, that I am not watching Alexei for signs of what is coming, that I am not memorizing every moment with the desperate intensity of someone who knows that time is running out. And he is trying too. I can see it in the way he lingers over breakfast, in the way he finds excuses to touch me as he passes through rooms, in the way he sits with Luca long after our son has fallen asleep just watching him breathe. And I understand that he is saying goodbye in the only way he knows how, that he is storing up memories against the possibility that they might be all he gets to take with him. And the understanding of what he is doing breaks my heart, even as it makes me love him more fiercely, more completely, more desperately than I ever have before. On the fourth morning, I wake to find him already dressed in black, already armed in ways that are impossible to miss, already transformed from the father who made pancakes yesterday into the predator who is about to hunt. And he sits on the edge of the bed and takes my hand and tells me that today is the day, that everything is in motion, that by tonight it will be over one way or another, and I want to beg him not to go, want to tell him that we can run, that we can disappear, that Victor is not worth dying for, but I know it would be useless, know that he has made his choice, know that this is who he is and what he does, and I cannot change him, can only love him and trust him, and pray that he is as good at violence as his reputation suggests. "Come home to us," I whisper, gripping his hand so tightly that it must hurt. "Come home to Luca, come home to me, come home because we need you, because you are not just a weapon or a monster or a means of protection. You are a father and a partner, and the man we love. And we cannot do this without you, cannot build this life without you, cannot be whole if you are gone. So whatever you have to do, whatever it takes, you survive, you understand me, you survive and you come home." He kisses me then, deep and desperate and devastating, kisses me like he is trying to pour everything he cannot say into the contact, every promise and every apology, and every declaration of love that he has never been able to articulate. And when he pulls away, his eyes are bright with unshed tears, and he touches my face with a gentleness that contradicts the weapons he is carrying. And he says, "I love you, Elena. I have loved you from the moment I saw you. I loved you when you left me. I loved you through 3 years of not knowing where you were, and I will love you until I draw my last breath, which is not going to be today. I promise you it is not going to be today, because I have too much to live for, too much waiting for. Me here, too many bedtime stories I have not read, and too many cookies I have not burned, and too many moments with you and Luca that I have not experienced yet. And I am greedy, Elena. I am so greedy for this life we are building that I will fight through hell itself to get back to it, to get back to you, to get back to our son who is sleeping down the hall, completely unaware that his father is about to risk everything to keep him safe." And then he is gone, slipping out of the room before I can say anything else, before I can find words adequate to the magnitude of what is happening. And I lie in bed listening to the sound of his car pulling out of the driveway, listening to the house settling into the silence he leaves behind, listening to my own heartbeat, which is too fast, too loud, too fragile. And I know that all I can do now is wait, is keep Luca entertained and distracted and unaware that anything is wrong, is trust that the man I love is as deadly as everyone fears, is pray to gods I am not sure I believe in that he will keep his promise, that he will survive whatever hell he is walking into, that he will come home to us. And as the morning light fills the room and I hear Luca starting to wake, calling for Mama and Papa in that sweet, sleepy voice that never fails to make my heart ache, I force myself out of bed, force myself to put on the mask of normalcy, force myself to be strong, because that is what mothers do. That is what love demands. And I walk down the hall to tell my son that Papa had to go to work early, but will be home soon, all while praying desperately that I am not lying, that soon really means today and not never, that the next time I see Alexei, he will be whole and alive and ready to resume the beautiful, complicated, terrifying life we have built together. Because the alternative, the possibility that this is the last morning I will ever wake up in a world where he exists, is too devastating to contemplate, too enormous to process, too final to accept. And so I choose hope over fear, choose faith over doubt, choose to believe that our story does not end today, that we have too many chapters left to write, that the fairy tale where the monster becomes the man is not finished yet, not by a long shot, and that when the dust settles and the violence is done, we will still be here, all 3 of us, ready to build the future we have been fighting for all along. They say you cannot have it all, that wanting the dangerous man and the quiet life and the family that feels like a dream you will wake from at any moment is asking for too much from a universe that deals in scarcity and compromise. They say that love like ours burns too hot and too fast, and consumes everything in its path until there is nothing left but ash and regret, and the bitter understanding that you should have known better, that you should have chosen differently, that you should have understood that violence and tenderness cannot coexist in the same body, in the same life, in the same story. But they are wrong. So catastrophically, beautifully, impossibly wrong, and I am living proof of exactly how wrong they are as I stand in the kitchen of the home Alexei built for us, watching through the window as he pushes Luca on the tire swing he installed last week, both of them laughing with abandon, both of them whole and alive and safe, both of them mine in ways that I still cannot fully comprehend, even though 6 months have passed since that terrible morning when he walked out the door dressed for war, and I spent the longest 16 hours of my life convinced that I would never see him again, that the last kiss we shared would have to sustain me for the rest of my existence, that I would have to find a way to raise our son alone and broken and forever haunted by the ghost of the man I loved. But he came home, walked through the door at 3 a.m, covered in blood that was not his own, exhausted and bruised, and looking like he had aged a decade in the span of a single day. And I had fallen asleep on the couch waiting for him, had finally succumbed to exhaustion after spending the entire day keeping Luca entertained and distracted, while my mind conjured every possible nightmare scenario. And when I woke to find him sitting on the coffee table in front of me, just watching me with an expression that was equal parts relief and devastation, I had thrown myself at him with such force that we both nearly toppled to the floor, and I had held him and cried into his shoulder and hit him weakly with my fists for making me wait so long, for not calling, for not giving me any indication that he was alive, and he had let me, had absorbed my fear and my anger and my overwhelming relief without protest, had simply held me and whispered apologies into my hair until I had exhausted myself and could do nothing but cling to him and breathe in the scent of him that meant safety, that meant home, that meant he had kept his promise and survived and come back to us. "It is done," he had said finally, his voice rough and empty in a way that told me more about what he had experienced than any detailed explanation could have. "Victor Velasco is dead. His organization is scattered. The threat to you and to Luca no longer exists. And I am here, I am home. And I need you to know that I am never, never leaving you again unless you ask me to. Unless you decide that what I did, what I am, is too much for you to accept. Too much for you to live with. Too dark for you to love." And I had pulled back just enough to look at him, to see the fear and vulnerability written across his features, to understand that he was giving me an out, offering me the choice to walk away now that the immediate danger had passed, now that I no longer needed his protection in quite the same desperate way, and the fact that he was willing to let me go even though it would destroy him, even though Luca would be devastated, even though our family would be shattered, that willingness to prioritize my choice over his own wants. That was the moment I knew with absolute certainty that I was never going anywhere, that this was my life, my family, my choice, and I would make it again and again no matter what the cost. The weeks that followed were difficult in ways I had not anticipated, not because of external threats or renewed danger, but because Alexei struggled with what he had done in ways that surprised me, retreated into himself in moments when he thought I was not watching, looked at Luca with an expression that suggested he was afraid our son would somehow sense the violence in him, would instinctively understand that his father's hands had taken lives just days ago. And I realized that for all his strength, for all his ruthlessness, for all his carefully cultivated reputation as a man without conscience or mercy, he was tormented by the disconnect between who he had to be to keep us safe and who he wanted to be for our son, and watching him struggle with that, watching him try to reconcile the two versions of himself, was heartbreaking and beautiful in equal measure because it meant he cared, meant he was aware of the moral weight of his choices, meant he was not the monster everyone believed him to be, but rather a man trying desperately to be better than his circumstances, better than his history, better than the world that had shaped him into a weapon. I had found him one night in Luca's room, sitting on the floor beside our sleeping son's bed, with his head in his hands. And when I knelt beside him, he had looked at me with eyes that were haunted and lost and asked, "How do I teach him to be good when I am not good? How do I show him the right way to live when I have spent my entire life doing wrong things for what I convince myself are right reasons? How do I look at him and not see all the ways I am going to fail him? All the ways my darkness is going to touch his light no matter how carefully I try to keep them separate?" And I had taken his face in my hands and forced him to meet my gaze and told him the truth that I had been learning myself over these months of watching them together. You teach him by trying, by showing up every day, by making pancakes and reading stories and building tree houses, by loving him so fiercely that he never doubts his worth, by being present in all the small moments that matter. And yes, you will make mistakes. You will fail sometimes. You will not always know the right thing to say or do. But Luca will not remember the perfect father you wish you could be. He will remember the father you actually are. The one who tries. The one who cares. The one who would burn the world down to keep him safe. And that will be enough. It has to be enough, because perfection is not what children need. Presence is what they need, and you are so present, so attentive, so completely devoted to him that he will never question whether he is loved. That conversation had been a turning point, had given Alexei permission to be imperfect, to be human, to accept that he could be both the man who had eliminated Victor Velasco and the father who cried during the emotional parts of children's movies. And gradually, slowly, he had begun to relax into this life we were building, had begun to trust that Luca would not be damaged by having a complicated father, had begun to believe that maybe, possibly, he deserved the happiness that had been given to him, deserved the family he had fought so hard to protect, deserved the love that I offered freely and without reservation, despite everything I knew about him, everything I had seen, everything he had done. We had settled into a rhythm that felt sustainable, felt real, felt like it might actually last beyond the crisis that had brought us together. And I watched as the lines of tension that had been permanently etched into Alexei's face began to soften, as he laughed more easily, as he allowed himself to be vulnerable in small ways that suggested he was beginning to trust that this was not temporary, that we were not going to disappear, that he had not just been given a taste of happiness before it was inevitably ripped away. Maria had watched this transformation with her characteristic pragmatism, had grudgingly admitted that perhaps she had been wrong about him, that perhaps men like him could change when given sufficient motivation, when presented with something worth changing for. And while she still watched him with a protective eye whenever he was with Luca, her suspicion had mellowed into something that resembled acceptance, even respect, especially after the morning she had found him in the kitchen at dawn, making elaborate birthday preparations for our son's 4th birthday, surrounded by ingredients and recipes he had printed out, determined to create the perfect dinosaur cake despite having no baking skills whatsoever. And she had stepped in to help him. And they had worked side by side in companionable silence until the cake was finished, until Alexei had looked at it with satisfaction and said, "He is going to love this." And Maria had responded, "Yes, because you made it for him, because you cared enough to try, because he knows his papa loves him." And that simple acknowledgement, that recognition from the woman who had been Luca's primary protector, aside from me for his entire life, had meant more to Alexei than I think he knew how to express. The morning of Luca's birthday had been chaos and joy in equal measure, our house filled with the handful of children from his new preschool, who Alexei had carefully vetted, their parents who had been subjected to background checks they were not aware of, and enough decorations and entertainment to rival a professional event, because Alexei did not know how to do things by half measures, and if his son wanted a dinosaur party, then he was going to have the most spectacular dinosaur party that money and obsessive attention to detail could provide. I had watched him all day, had seen the way he engaged with every child, had observed how naturally he moved through the role of host and father, how he made sure Luca felt celebrated and special and loved. And I had felt my heart expand with an emotion that was too big for my chest, too overwhelming to name, too powerful to contain. And when Luca had blown out his candles and made a wish and then announced that his wish was that Papa would live with them forever, Alexei had looked at me across the chaos of the party with tears in his eyes, and I had nodded, had mouthed, forever, had given him the permission he was still seeking, the reassurance he still needed, the confirmation that this was not temporary, that we were building something permanent, that he was not going to lose us, that we had chosen him just as completely as he had chosen us. That night, after the guests had left, and Luca had finally crashed from his sugar high and been tucked into bed surrounded by his new toys, and his wolves, and his complete contentment, Alexei had found me on the balcony that overlooked the property he had secured for us, the fortress he had built, the life he had made possible through means I did not examine too closely, because I had learned that sometimes survival means accepting complexity, means living in the gray spaces between right and wrong, means understanding that morality is not always black and white when you are protecting people you love. "Thank you," he had said, coming to stand beside me, his shoulder pressing against mine in that way he had of seeking contact, of needing the physical confirmation of my presence. And when I asked him what he was thanking me for, he had turned to me with an expression that was open and vulnerable and completely unguarded in a way that still surprised me even after all these months. "For giving me this," he said, gesturing back toward the house, toward the room where our son slept, toward the life we had built together, for trusting me with Luca, for letting me be his father, for choosing to stay even when you had every reason to run, for loving me despite everything you know about what I am and what I have done, for believing that I could be more than just the monster everyone fears, for seeing something in me worth saving, worth fighting for, worth building a future with. And most of all, for giving me a reason to want to be better, to try to deserve you both, to work every day to be the kind of man that a son could be proud of, and a woman could love without reservation. I had turned to face him fully then, had reached up to cup his face in my hands the way I did when I needed him to hear me. Really hear me. When I needed him to understand something fundamental, and I had told him the truth that I had been learning slowly, gradually, over these months of watching him with Luca, over these months of falling in love with him all over again, over these months of understanding that the man I had run from and the man I was choosing to build a life with were the same person seen from different angles, different contexts, different moments in time. "You do not need to thank me for loving you," I said. "Loving you is not a sacrifice or a gift or something I am choosing despite reservations. Loving you is as natural as breathing, as inevitable as sunrise, as necessary as the air I breathe. And yes, you are complicated and dangerous and have done things that I will never fully understand. But you are also kind and patient and devastatingly gentle with our son. And those things coexist in you. They are both true. And I do not love you despite your darkness. I love you including your darkness. Because that darkness is what protects us, what keeps us safe, what allows Luca to grow up innocent and protected and loved. And I would rather have you, all of you, the monster and the man, than have anyone else in the world." He had kissed me then, deep and desperate and full of promise, had kissed me like I was the answer to every question he had ever asked, like I was the home he had been searching for his entire life, like I was the redemption he thought he could never deserve. And when we finally pulled apart, he had pressed his forehead to mine and whispered, "Marry me, Elena. Not because of Luca, not because of obligation or duty, or because it makes sense strategically, but because I want to wake up beside you every morning for the rest of my life, because I want to make this permanent in every way that matters, because I want to stand in front of whatever gods will have me, and promise to love you and protect you and be worthy of you, for as long as I draw breath. Marry me because life is too short and too uncertain, and I have already wasted too much time not being with you. Marry me because I love you with everything I am and everything I will ever be. Marry me because you are mine and I am yours, and that is the only truth that has ever really mattered. And I had said yes, had said it without hesitation or doubt or reservation, had said it because he was right, because life was too short to waste time pretending that we were not building forever, because I wanted the permanence, wanted the commitment, wanted to claim him publicly and completely, wanted Luca to grow up in a house where his parents were married and committed and building a life together, rather than simply coexisting in careful proximity. And 3 months later, we had stood in the garden of our home surrounded by the people who mattered, Maria and a handful of Alexei's most trusted men, and a few friends from Luca's school who had become our friends as well. And we had spoken vows that were honest and raw and completely true, promising to love each other through darkness and light, through danger and peace, through all the complications that came with being who we were and building the life we had chosen. And when Luca had shouted, "You may kiss the bride," before the officiant could say the words, we had both laughed and complied, and it had been perfect in its imperfection, beautiful in its simplicity, exactly what we needed it to be. Now, 6 months after that wedding, 3 months after we discovered I am pregnant again, 2 weeks after we learned that this time we are having a daughter, I stand at this window watching my husband play with our son, and I feel something settle deep in my chest, something that feels like peace or contentment, or perhaps simply the understanding that this is my life, this is my family, this is the choice I made and continue to make every single day. And I would not change it, would not go back, would not choose differently even if I could, because this complicated, messy, beautiful, terrifying life is mine, and I have claimed it fully. Luca is chattering endlessly about something, his small hands gesturing wildly as he explains whatever elaborate game he has invented. And Alexei is listening with complete attention, responding seriously to whatever our son is saying. And I can see from here the way his hand rests protectively on Luca's shoulder, the way he positions himself between our son and any potential threat even in the safety of our own backyard, the way he is always aware, always vigilant, always ready to be the shield that stands between his family and anything that might hurt them. Maria appears beside me at the window, drying her hands on a dish towel, and we stand together in comfortable silence watching them, and finally she says what I have been thinking. You did well, choosing him, choosing this life, choosing to stay and fight instead of running. And that little boy out there is proof that love can exist in complicated places, that families can be built in unlikely circumstances, that sometimes the most dangerous men make the most devoted fathers, and I am sorry I doubted it. Sorry I doubted him. Sorry I did not see what you saw until it was too late to take back my suspicion and my judgment. I reach over and take her hand, squeezing it gently, because she has nothing to apologize for, because her suspicion kept us safe, because her vigilance protected Luca when I was too overwhelmed to do it myself, because she loved us enough to question everything until she was certain. And that kind of love, that fierce, protective love, is exactly what we all needed. The door opens and they tumble in, Luca grass-stained and happy and talking a mile a minute about the dragon he and Papa defeated in the yard, and Alexei right behind him, scooping him up despite his protests that he is too big to be carried anymore. And they are both laughing, and I feel tears prick my eyes because this right here, this ordinary moment of family chaos and joy, this is what I was protecting when I ran. This is what I was fighting for when I came back. This is what every difficult choice and every moment of fear and every compromise has been in service of. And it was worth it, God. It was so worth it. Luca wriggles free and runs to show Maria his latest treasure, some rock or stick or piece of nature that is fascinating only to 4-year-olds. And Alexei comes to me, slides his arms around my waist, rests his hands on the slight swell of my stomach where our daughter is growing, and he leans down to press a kiss to my temple. What are you thinking about? He murmurs, and I turn in his arms to look up at him, at this man who has given me everything, who has become everything, who has transformed from the monster of my nightmares into the man of my dreams without ceasing to be either, without pretending that the darkness does not exist, simply learning to balance it with light. I am thinking about how I used to believe that happiness and safety were two different things, I say. How I thought that loving you meant choosing danger over peace, chaos over stability. How I was convinced that your world and the life I wanted for Luca could never coexist. And how wrong I was. How beautifully, completely, perfectly wrong. Because you have given us both. Have built us a life where we are protected and loved and free to be happy. Where Luca can play without fear and I can breathe without constantly looking over my shoulder. Where we are a family in every way that matters. And I am thinking that I am the luckiest woman alive. Not because our life is perfect. Because it is not. Not because you are perfect. Because you are not. But because you are ours. Because you chose us. Because you fight every day to be the man we need you to be. Because you love us fiercely enough to be both the monster who protects us and the man who holds us. And that duality, that complexity, that willingness to be everything we need even when it costs you, that is what makes you extraordinary. His arms tighten around me, and I feel the way his breath hitches slightly. The way emotion moves through him even though he is trying to hold it back. Trying to stay composed, trying to be strong. And I reach up to touch his face and give him permission to be vulnerable, to be human, to let me see all of him. And when he speaks, his voice is rough with feeling. I spent my whole life believing I would die alone, he says, believing that men like me did not get families, did not get love, did not get happy endings because we were too dark, too damaged, too steeped in violence to deserve anything soft or good or pure. And then you walked into my life and turned everything I believed upside down. And then you gave me Luca, gave me a son I did not know I was capable of loving, a son who looks at me like I hung the moon instead of like I am the monster everyone says I am. And now you are giving me a daughter. And Elena, I am terrified. I am so terrified that I am going to mess this up, that I am going to fail you all, that my past is going to catch up with us in ways I cannot predict or prevent. But I am also more grateful than I know how to express, more committed than I have ever been, to anything, more determined to be worthy of this gift you have given me. And I promise you, I promise on everything I am and everything I will ever be, that I will spend the rest of my life protecting you and our children, providing for you, being present for every moment that I can be, and trying every single day to be the kind of man that you can be proud of, that Luca can look up to, that our daughter can trust. Because you are my everything. You and these children are my entire world, and there is nothing I would not do, no line I would not cross, no sacrifice I would not make to keep you all safe and happy and loved. I pull him down to kiss me, and it is a kiss that tastes like promises and hope and the future we are building together. And when we break apart, Luca is tugging on Alexei's pant leg, demanding that Papa come see what he and Maria are making for dinner. And we both laugh and allow ourselves to be pulled into the warm, bright kitchen where the people we love are waiting, where the life we have fought for is unfolding in ordinary moments and extraordinary love. And as I watch Alexei lift Luca onto the counter so he can help stir whatever Maria is cooking, as I see the easy affection between them, the natural way they move around each other, the family we have become against all odds, I understand with perfect clarity that this is not just survival. This is not just making the best of a difficult situation. This is actual, real, hard-won happiness. And it is more valuable, more precious, more worthy of protecting than anything else in the world. That night, after Luca has been tucked into bed with his wolves and his stories and his goodnight kisses from both of us, after Maria has retired to her rooms and the house has settled into peaceful quiet, Alexei and I stand on our balcony looking out over the life we have built. The fortress that has become a home. The careful construction that has transformed into something organic and real and lasting. And I lean back against his chest and feel his arms come around me, protective and possessive and infinitely gentle. And I think about the girl I was 3 years ago, running through the night with a secret growing inside her, terrified and alone and convinced that distance was the only way to keep her child safe. And I wish I could go back and tell her that it would be okay, that the monster she was running from would become the man she runs toward, that fear would transform into trust, that the dangerous love she was fleeing would become the foundation of the most beautiful life she could imagine, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is not run but stay, not hide but be seen, not protect yourself but open yourself to the terrifying vulnerability of loving someone completely, trusting someone fully, building a life with someone who could destroy you, but chooses instead to cherish you. "What are you thinking about?" Alexei asks, his voice a low rumble against my back. And I smile, because he always asks, always wants to know what is going on in my head, always seeks that connection, that intimacy, that understanding that goes beyond the physical, and I turn in his arms to face him, to look up at the man who has become my everything, who has given me everything, who has proven that redemption is possible, that change is achievable, that love is strong enough to transform even the darkest soul into something capable of extraordinary light. "I am thinking about beginnings and endings," I say, about how our story started in fear and violence and desperate choices, about how it could have ended 1,000 different ways, most of them tragic, and about how instead it has become this beautiful, complicated, imperfect life that we have built together. And I am thinking that this is not an ending at all, but a beginning, the start of whatever comes next, the foundation of a future that we will build one day at a time, one choice at a time, one moment of love and trust and commitment at a time. And I am thinking that I would choose you again, would choose this life again, would choose us again and again and again, forever, without hesitation, without doubt, without reservation, because you are my home, Alexei, you and Luca and the daughter we have not met yet. You are my family, you are my heart. You are the answer to every question I did not know I was asking. And I love you. I love you so much that it terrifies me sometimes. But it is a good terror. A worthy terror. The kind that comes from having something so precious that the thought of losing it is unbearable. And I would rather live with that terror than live without you. Would rather face every danger and every complication and every difficult moment as long as I get to face it with you beside me. He does not respond with words, cannot seem to find language adequate to the emotion moving through him, and instead he simply holds me like I am the most precious thing in the world, like I am the answer to prayers he never dared to speak, like I am his redemption and his salvation and his reason for being. And we stand there as the stars emerge overhead and the night wraps around us, and somewhere inside our son sleeps peacefully, dreaming whatever uncomplicated dreams 4-year-olds dream, protected and loved and secure in the knowledge that he is wanted, that he belongs, that he has a papa who would move mountains for him and a mama who would fight the world to keep him safe. And I understand that this, right here, this moment of perfect peace after so much chaos, this feeling of being exactly where I am supposed to be, with exactly who I am supposed to be with, this is what happiness looks like in the real world, not the fairy tale version where everything is easy and perfect and uncomplicated, but the hard-won, battle-scarred, deeply genuine version where happiness exists alongside fear, where love coexists with danger, where family is built not in spite of complications but through them, where the monster becomes the man, not through magic, but through choice, through effort, through the daily decision to be better, to do better, to love harder than the darkness wants to destroy. And I find myself whispering into the night, into his chest, into the universe that has somehow given me more than I ever dared to hope for. Thank you. Thank you for bringing me here, for giving me this, for showing me that love is not the absence of fear, but the courage to choose it anyway. And I promise to honor this gift, to protect this family, to love you and our children with everything I am, for as long as I live, through whatever comes, because we are worth it. We are worth every difficult choice, every moment of terror, every sacrifice, and I would not trade this life, our life, for anything. Not for safety or simplicity or peace. Because what we have is more valuable than any of those things. What we have is real and messy and beautiful and ours, and that is enough, more than enough. It is everything. And as we stand there wrapped in each other, and the night, and the profound understanding that we have survived the worst and built something extraordinary from the ashes, I realize that this is not the ending I imagined when I ran 3 years ago. Terrified and pregnant, and convinced that distance was the only answer. And it is not the ending anyone who knew our story would have predicted, because endings like ours do not happen to people like us. To love built on foundations of violence and fear and impossible choices. But perhaps that is the point. Perhaps the most powerful stories are the ones that defy expectations, that insist on happy endings even when logic suggests they should be impossible, that prove love can be stronger than fear, that family can be built in the most unlikely places, that monsters can learn to be men if they are given sufficient reason to try. And we are living proof, walking evidence, breathing testimony to the fact that sometimes, just sometimes, if you are brave enough and stubborn enough and willing to fight for it with everything you have, you can have it all. The dangerous man and the quiet life, the protection and the peace, the darkness and the light, the monster and the man, the fairy tale ending that is not a fairy tale at all, but something better, something real, something worth every moment of terror it took to get here. And as I finally allow myself to fully relax into his arms, into this life, into the beautiful, terrifying, perfect future stretching out before us, I whisper one last truth into the night. This is not the life I planned, but it is the life I choose, every day, every moment, forever. And I would not change a single thing because every choice, every mistake, every moment of fear led me here, to you, to us, to this family that should not exist but does, gloriously, defiantly, permanently. And that is the greatest gift I have ever been given. The greatest story I will ever tell, the greatest love I will ever know, and I am grateful, so grateful for every moment of it, the beautiful and the terrible and everything in between, because it is ours uniquely, impossibly, eternally ours.